What's the big deal about Aristotle? Perhaps you're watching this because some Aristotle reading has been assigned in your undergraduate philosophy class and you're looking for some help understanding that reading. Or perhaps you're watching because this video has been assigned. Or simply for your own intellectual enhancement. Regardless of which describes you, you may have some doubts about the great importance many ascribe to Aristotle's work, especially since he is one in a long line of white male thinkers whose work is typically assigned in Western introductory philosophy courses. Though female and non-white thinkers' work probably have been unjustly overlooked or suppressed in the years during and since Aristotle rose to prominence, there are still many good reasons for reading his work, learning about his life, and spending a good deal of time doing so. Here are a few, in brief. He established his own school, the Lyceum, and his work defines several subfields or subdisciplines of philosophy. For instance, he is often called the father of logic. He is also a father figure to biology, which he wrote a great deal about. He was so highly regarded by the medieval philosopher, theologian St. Thomas Aquinas that the latter called him the philosopher. I'll spend the next few minutes saying a little more about each of these points. Aristotle was probably the most famous student to emerge from Plato's academy, after which modern academics gets its name. He was Plato's student there for about 2 decades. Aristotle was highly regarded in his time, and not just afterwards, evidenced by his being selected to serve as tutor for Alexander the Great. He clearly had the educational pedigree and academic fame needed to begin his own school, which started off as the Lyceum and then became the Peripatetic School, lasting for about 500 years. Though Socrates and Plato, as well as their followers, were engaged in the study of modern subdisciplines of philosophy, like logic, metaphysics, ethics, and politics, these areas were not clearly defined until Aristotle devoted specific works to each of them. Though his work on logic spans more than one work, the collection of treatises now known as the Organon were the first of their kind in establishing the rules, principles, and terminology of the study of logic. For instance, Aristotle's writing on the square of opposition from his text On Interpretation, which is part of the Organon, works out in systematic fashion the distinctions among the different kinds of opposition, contradictories, contraries, subcontraries, and subalterns. Also, in his work on sophistical refutations, also part of the Organon, he lays out many informal fallacies, to the lists of which many more have been added in the centuries since Aristotle. Aristotle's work on metaphysics spans more than just the text with metaphysics as its name, but the fact that Aristotle devoted that substantial text to this study of that which is after physics, or beyond the physical, situating it in relation to logic and the study of nature, played a substantial role in defining metaphysics as a specific subfield or subdiscipline of philosophy, which many followed Aristotle in studying in its own right for centuries after. It's the study of being. Okay, it's not to be confused with witchcraft or astrology, both of which are somehow often found in metaphysics sections of modern bookstores. Aristotle devoted at least two works to the study of ethics: the study of the good life, the study of good actions. Though there are possibly more than just two Aristotelian works on ethics, the Nicomachean Ethics is the most highly regarded. Indeed, it is recognized as Aristotle's most authoritative and complete work on ethics, such that it is simply often called the Ethics. Ethics is now one of the most, indeed perhaps the most, important subfields of philosophy, and we have Aristotle to thank for delimiting it and situating it as a study of its own. Though there are many other areas of philosophy, like epistemology, the study of knowledge, philosophy of law, and philosophy of science, to which Aristotle made extraordinary contributions, I'll just add a few more remarks about his work on politics and biology, which also each have specific texts devoted to them. The Politics contains Aristotle's political theory, spanning the role of the family in the city-state to the relation of the city-state to foreign entities. In Nicomachean Ethics, Aristotle defines the role of politics, especially as it relates to ethics, explaining what a good political scientist needs to do in order to create a good city that forms good people. Aristotle's work on biology includes a now famous text on the parts of animals, and his extensive biological research shows up in his other works as well, like his argument in Nicomachean Ethics Book 1 that the proper function of a human being, in contrast to all other natural creatures, is reason. Finally, St. Thomas Aquinas, known now also as the Angelic Doctor, is widely agreed to be the most authoritative, impactful figure in the Catholic intellectual tradition, perhaps besides Jesus, of course. It is widely held that Aquinas bases most of his work on Aristotle, who he calls the philosopher, than any other thinker. In the 1200s, there was a revival of research into and scholarship based on Aristotle's work, taking place not only among Christian intellectuals, but others as well, especially Islamic thinkers. Aristotle's impact on medieval thought, then, is not just limited to the Christian tradition. Today, there are still many philosophers studying Aristotle, not only to obtain more accurate and in-depth interpretation of his work, but also to inform modern research in many areas, including logic, metaphysics, ethics, and politics.